Hi there guys, it's Jack and welcome to your Theory for Guitar module. So, if what makes a great guitar player and a musician is talent, hard work, and then I'd argue knowing what you're doing. Because knowing what you're doing opens up different avenues for you, saves you time, okay? And also, if you know what you're doing, you can explore certain things that you might not have thought of exploring by just using your ear. And then as a result, your ear actually gets better, right? So learning music theory doesn't replace having a good ear. It works with having a good ear. And in fact, it can improve your ear. So let's jump in. So we have our PDF book, and I kind of talk a little bit about some of the things I addressed just now. One of the things I didn't really talk about that's in the document is the fact that a lot of popular music like reggae, rock, blues, jazz, at its heart, there's an awful lot of traditional European classical music built into those styles. The relationship again between different keys, chords coming from scales, etc. And then later you get, like the blues and jazz and rock kind of mixing things up, adding different flavors, bending the rules or changing them a little bit. But it's hard to understand those changes if we don't understand the fundamentals, right? So that's another great reason to kind of learn music theory, is it kind of helps you understand the history of music and understand different styles of playing, where they came from, where they're going, and all that kind of thing. So let's jump in with some terminology now. So I give a couple terms that we just kind of want to know right off the bat. And one of those terms is an octave, which that shouldn't be too hard for most of us. It's just this idea that, when we play music, most music is what's called tonal, and it has a tonality, and tone means like note or sound, right? So all that means is that when you play a song, and you know this already, there's a main note. If a song is in the key of A minor, then A is your main note, right? And like an A minor chord might be your main chord, right? So the idea of an octave just means, hey, I'm going from one A to the next A, right? And you can do that in all kinds of different ways. You can do it in a single string. Here's an A, and then here's the next A, and so on. Or we can do it by playing across the strings in a position. So that's all examples of the octave. An octave means we take a note, it's going to be maybe our main note of our song, and you just move up through the notes until you get to the next A. Sound-wise, you're like doubling the frequency of the sound wave, but you don't really need to know that. So on the guitar course, 12th fret is where we get our octaves for all our strings, right? Okay, so that's the term octave. If there was ever any mystery for it, for you, then now there isn't, right? It just means taking a note, and then moving up until you get to the next version of that same note. That fact that they do have the doubled sound wave is what makes it sound like the same note, just higher or lower to our ear. Okay? Then, so what's a scale? We know an octave is just moving from one note to that same note. A scale is, well, how do we break down all the notes in between, right? And that's where we have lots and lots and lots of different patterns, right? On the guitar, we're talking about patterns of half steps and whole steps. 1 fret on the guitar, every time we go 1 fret, that's called a half step. Every time we go 2 frets, that's called a whole step. So with some exceptions, most scales are combinations of half steps and whole steps. And the different patterns that you can have to divide up an octave, they give you the different types of scales, right? So for example, if there's an A and here's an A, you could play, a pattern like that, where I have a certain pattern of whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, and then whole step, and so on. And that gives you a certain scale. I could have had a different pattern. That's a major scale pattern. I could have had a major blues pent pattern. I could have had a minor pen, or a flamenco kind of scale. scale, right? But all those different scales are just different collections of patterns, and mostly whole steps and half steps on the guitar. Okay, so those are two terms we really want to understand well. Octave, we go from one note until we get to the next version of the same note, A to an A, C to a C, etc. A scale just means like, well, how do we divide up that octave? And the different patterns are like blueprints for different scales. It's kind of the reason why when you memorize a shape on the guitar, like you learn a pentatonic scale, it's movable. Because if, I play a G pent and then I move my hand up, but I do the same finger pattern, that finger pattern means I'm doing the same, collection of whole steps and half steps or 1.5 steps or whatever I'm doing, right? And so playing the same pattern, you're playing the same type of scale, and just where your hand is determines the root or what kind of, the name of the scale. Is it an A blues or a G blues, and etc. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. So, the most important scale, as you'll see on page 3 of your document, that we want to kind of start with is actually C major. And there's a reason why C major, wherever you want to play it, or on one string, it's a super, super important scale for us to know, because major scales and minor scales, historically super crazy important. They're the two most commonly used scales for the last 800 years or so, right? And so much music is built off of them, major scales, basic major scales and minor scales. And then, like I said, a lot of the tweaks that came later from popular music, blues, rock, and jazz and stuff, they still started with those basic major and minor scales and then kind of tweaked them. So we really want to understand that major scale really, really well, because it is like historically the most important scale for us and for the whole kind of Western world. And we can learn a lot about all different styles of music if we understand that scale really well first. Okay? So there's a couple things that you're going to want to memorize to understand that scale really well. The first is a major scale pattern is created by moving through a whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half pattern. Okay? So 2 wholes and a half, 3 wholes and a half. That's a formula for a major scale. And we want to remember that, okay, on the guitar, that means, 2 frets for a whole step and 1 fret for a half step. So for example, this is a B string, right? And here's a C right here. So if I wanted to play this C up to the next C, I could do it like this. Whole step to D, whole step to E, half step to F, whole step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, and half step to C. Okay? And I chose to show you that on a single string for a reason. Because when we play patterns and positions, we cross the strings. When we cross the strings, for most of us, me included, it's really hard to see, like, well, what was that? Was that a whole step or a half step, right? Because it's kind of hard to kind of keep that picture in our head of what's happening when we cross the strings. But when we're on one string and we're moving up and down, we have this kind of linear visual going on, and it really helps reinforce what we're doing. So that would be one really good thing for you to do. Just, to kind of see how a major scale works. Start on this C here. You might want to say the notes as you play them and say the distance between as you move in between. So again, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. You want to memorize that. That's a major scale pattern. And then the next thing that's really, really good to memorize is E and F and B and C are your half steps. So if you know that, then everything else is by default a whole step. Okay, so one more time. You might want to just, pause the video, do this with me, pause the video, do it after me, whatever. But just kind of mapping out a C scale right here on your guitar. You can start anywhere, this C up to here. This is a really nice, convenient location, especially on an acoustic, because we don't have to go too much above the 13th fret here. So again, we have C, whole step to D, whole step to E, half step to F, whole step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, half step to C. Okay? Backwards is a little harder, and you're going to have to get used to saying the scale backwards, but it's good to do. So we got C, down to B, whole step to A, whole step to G, whole step to F, half step to E, whole step to D, whole step to C. Okay, so you're going to find for sure that it's harder to go backwards than forwards. Okay, so it's even actually worth kind of just doing something a little bit off to the side a little bit, which is just learning to say the musical alphabet backwards. There's only the 7 letters in the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but you want to be able to say G, F, E, D, C, B, A, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D. You know, you want to be able to say those notes backwards as easily as forwards. Because when you're playing backwards, you want to be able to think about what notes you're playing. Okay? All right, so that's, seems pretty basic, right? But we're just kind of starting to map out, there's a C scale, and I can kind of see the whole, half, whole, half pattern. All right? So that's one application. All right. Now, here's something that's kind of really interesting about what we just did. If you understand what we just learned, the C scale moving up and down the neck, then you can literally take care of something that's like a mystery for most guitar players, even after years and years and years of playing. And that mystery is not knowing what the notes are on the fretboard. Okay? Most guitar players do not know the notes on the fretboard, which is a real shame, right? But if you know that C scale, everything is a whole step except E, F, B, C, and you know the names of the strings, E, A, D, G, B, E, which I'm sure you do, you can map out and learn all the notes all over the fretboard, okay? So for example, here's an E. So now we're not going to play an E major scale, okay, with whole, half, whole, half. We're going to play the C major notes jumping in on the E string, okay? So this is where that E, F, B, C comes in handy. If you know E, F, B, C and everything else is a whole step, E, F, B, C being a half step, then you can map out all the notes on the guitar. So for example, here's E, half step to F, whole step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, half step to C, whole step to D, whole step to E. All right? Backwards is a little harder, so you might want to pause the video and do forwards a couple times and then try backwards. E, whole step to D, whole step down to C, half to B, there's A, whole step down, G, F, and E. Okay? Now, don't worry about the fact that that doesn't sound like a major scale. In fact, it sounds like this. Kind of Spanishy kind of scale, right? Don't worry about that. We're not playing E major. We're just not going to worry about the type of scale we get from E to E using C major notes. We're just trying to use what we know about C major to map out the fretboard. Okay? So, and this is going to be super, super useful because if you know like all the C major notes, well, let's learn 2 more terms right here. Sharp means go up 1 fret. Flat means go down 1 fret, or up a half step, down a half step, same thing. So say you map out your C major notes, right? And you know, oh yeah, okay, this is a B. Okay, well then this is B flat. You know this is a D. Then this is D sharp. Okay? So if you learn the C major notes, it's very easy to picture all the notes. Okay? So again, one application is going to be, once you understand that C major scale, is take the guitar and map out your C major notes at least to the 12th fret. And if you want to go up to like 15, if you're playing on your electric, then great. But at least up to the 12th fret. What happens at the 12th fret? E to E, B to B, you get your octave, right? So I'm going to do one more with you, and then I'll let you kind of do the rest on your own. So here's a B string, right? Okay, so again, B, C, and E and F, E, F, B, C, that's our half steps. So I'd say B, half step to C, whole step to D, whole step to E, half step to F, whole step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B. Backwards, B, hold down to A, hold to G, hold to F, half to E, hold to D, hold to C, half to B. Okay, so after a while, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B. We'll learn all the notes on those strings, and we'll just kind of know, okay, there's my A, there's my F, there's my G, there's my D, there's my C, there's my E. You'll know all those notes. All right? So that's one application for your guitar. And my suggestion would be to really learn the fretboard really well, do a couple strings a day. Up and down playing your C major notes. Top 2 strings, next 2 strings, next 2 strings, and then cycle through. So every day you just spend a couple minutes until you get to the point where you can go, oh, okay, A flat, oh, okay, here's my B flat, oh, all right, here's E, okay, there's another A, there's A sharp, here's a G, here's a G sharp, you know, here's D flat, you know, you just know there's B. It won't be a mystery. We're kind of trying to take the mystery out of music in general and out of the guitar in particular. So learning theory will help you take the mystery out of music in general, and it's also going to help you take the mystery out of the guitar in particular, right? Hard instrument to kind of learn the notes on because it's not so visually digestible. Like a piano, it's real clear. You know, it's like one little pattern that repeats over and over again for an octave on the piano. Very easy to learn which ones are C, Ds, and Es. A lot of guitar players, though, they'll play for years, and I'll be like, cool, what's this note? And they won't know that it's an A, right? So you want to know your fretboard. So this is one application of theory that'll help you to do that right off the bat. Okay? All right, so let's dive in a little bit further, and we're going to get to our second application for the C major scale. And then we're going to take a little break. So, C major, we learned, is this whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. It's absolutely true. You get the idea. You can use the single string playing for, you know, soloing and making up melodies, right? That's absolutely true. It's very useful. But you know that most of the time guitar players are playing their scales in positions. They might shift the positions, they might slide between them. You know, they might kind of move between different positions, and that single string playing helps you to do that as well. But a lot of times, hey, we're just kind of in one spot, we're playing a scale shape, right? So let's learn our C major scale in a position. So every time we learn a scale on the guitar, I like to think there's several basic levels. There's always more you can do with more advanced picking and all this kind of stuff and fancy patterns, playing thirds, doing whatever. But the most important things are, one, you got to memorize the scale shape. And then two, you have to memorize the notes that you're playing. And then three, you can get into any kind of picking games that you're doing to kind of get faster or more proficient with your scale. But the first two steps are super, super important, of course. You can't do anything without memorizing the shape. But then the step that everybody skips is they don't bother to say the note names. So they learn a scale shape and they just go, oh, cool. What key am I in? I'm going to move my pointer finger or my middle finger to that note, and then I'll just play and not know what notes I'm playing. That's going to hold you back in the long run. Okay, it works in the short term to get you through some stuff, but in the long run, that's one of the things that holds people back from branching out. Like, okay, yeah, you want to be able to play a scale shape and everything and use your ear, but what if you want to change your scale in the middle of your solo because it just reflects the chords that are going on? You know, what if you want to pull out a note, like I was saying, out of like a blues scale? You want to pull out this F sharp, you know, just because you have a D7 chord going on. It sounds really good. You just hit that F sharp. It's really hard to do that kind of stuff if you don't know what notes you're playing. But if you do, it's super easy to do that stuff. It's easy to switch scale shapes. It's easy to find certain notes, right? So let's start with the first thing first, which is the pattern. So for C major, if you don't already know the scale shape, then we'll learn it now. If you already do, great. You can still review it and then learn how to say the note names. So pattern-wise, we have 2-4, 1-2-4, 1-3-4, 1-3-4, 2-4, 1-2. You can have the 4 on top. 4-2-1, 4-2, 4-3-1, 4-3-1, 4-2-1, 4-2. Okay, and that's all diagrammed out for you in your PDF. But the first thing you're going to want to do is memorize that pattern. 2-4-1-2-4, 1-3-4, 1-3-4, 2-4, 1-2-4, right? 2-4-1-2-4, 1-3-4, 1-3-4, 2-4-1-2-4, 4-2-1, 4-2, 4-3-1, 4-3-1, 4-2-1, 4-2. And that's a major scale pattern. There are lots of ways to play the major scale. That's not the only shape. But this is the shape that starts on the 1 of your scale. Other shapes might also be C major, but the lowest note in that position is not the 1. It's not the C. It's some other note. So you get a different shape, right? But this is that really, really common major scale shape that we learned because it actually does start on the main note, the root of your major scale. Okay? So that takes us to step 2. Don't just learn the pattern, learn to say the note names, right? So when you're playing the scale, after you got your pattern memorized, and pause the video, make sure you've done that, you go back and go real slow, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and that's just over and over. Make sure you can say C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, B, C, B, A, G, F, E, B, C. Okay? So pause the video and make sure you can comfortably say the names of the notes in that scale. All right. So let's take a little break here, and then when we continue, we are going to move on working into our chords.